At my parents' anniversary dinner, my dad wished my sister was their only child. I walked out and cut them off. Months later, their business collapsed and I made sure they could never recover from it. I, Lauren, 34, believed I had witnessed all of my family's partiality. The clinking glasses and laughter during my parents' 35th anniversary dinner in a busy Chicago restaurant died down when my dad got up and spoke sharply. He said, "We wish your sister was our only child." While focusing on me, there was silence in the room. Beyond the words, my sister Vanessa's smug smile was evident. Uncles, aunts, and cousins all looked on. My chest began to get hotter. I didn't cry, though. I didn't shout. Knowing that this was the last straw, I simply felt like I was burning inside. I had invested money and my heart into their failed company for years, only to be used as a punching bag. Something broke that night. I could no longer stand it any longer. With my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, I left already deciding what to do next. Their idyllic little world began to fall apart a week later, when their wish was granted in an unexpected way. Think of it as you. What would you say? Tell me about your country as well, so I can see how far this story has spread. I was always the afterthought as a child. Richard and Margaret, my parents made sure I never forgot it. They would beam at my sister Vanessa when I was a child, complimenting her flawless smile, debate team awards, and straight A's. If they saw me in the room, I was lucky. I still feel the pain of those years, such as when I won a math competition and they were too busy applauding Vanessa at her recital to come. With a smug nod, Vanessa absorbed it all, as if she were deserving of all of their affection. It was more than words. Everything was formed by their preference. During family dinners, Vanessa's stories, her most recent promotion, and her ambitious plans were the main topics. "Let's hear from your sister." Mom would interrupt if I talked, and Dad would nod while staring at her. I learned to swallow the pain and keep quiet. It wasn't only at home, though. At family get-togethers, they would parade Vanessa while I followed in the background unseen. They once boasted about Vanessa's new position at a retail chain all night long at a cousin's wedding without bringing up the fact that I had recently been hired as a finance manager. The worst part is that it's their business. In Chicago, my parents ran a modest clothing and accessory shop business. Despite being their pride and pleasure, it was constantly in danger. You name it, poor choices, late payments, etc. I helped them out every month, not just once, by sending $600 from my funds and offering hours of free financial assistance to keep the business going. I would do calculations, bargain with vendors, and even optimize their inventory management system. Were they appreciative of me? No. Even though Vanessa's proposals were at best ambiguous, they would still call her to brag about how her marketing ideas had saved the day. My work, a fresh sign here, a discount there, hardly a nod. I wasn't naive. I was aware that they relied on me not out of concern, but rather because I was skilled with statistics. I would grit my teeth every time I sent that $600 thinking about the trips I couldn't take and the flat I couldn't upgrade. However, I succeeded. Why obligation, family, that unyielding wish that they will see me someday? I would study their books late at night in my office, finding mistakes that would have cost them thousands of dollars. They would be at Vanessa's house in the meantime, admiring her most recent proposal for a store rebranding that never came to pass. It was the dismissal, not just the money. I once worked for weeks to resolve a tax problem for their store. Mom remarked, "Oh good," the day I informed them that everything was resolved. "Vanessa is preparing a huge sale for next month. By the way, no thanks, no recognition." Dad simply grunted and called Vanessa to talk about her vision. I felt like a ghost as I stood there with documents in hand. To save them hours, I also recommended new accounting software. They disregarded it until months later when Vanessa brought up the same concept. It was wonderful all of a sudden. In this case, Vanessa wasn't innocent. She would lean into their compliments and give me a pathetic glance as if I were a charity case. At a family cookout when I was 21, Mother made a joke about how fortunate I was to be the backup child. Mom chuckled. Her father did not correct her. The image of the knife twisting each time they elevated her stuck in my mind. Nevertheless, I continued to assist month after month by adjusting budgets and sending money because I believed that was what family did. I can clearly see it now. They not only took advantage of my money, but also my time and abilities. The person they depended on but never respected. I was their safety net. I chased their approval with every check I wrote and every late-night phone call on their finances. However, approval never materialized. After enlisting my assistance, they would turn around and extol Vanessa as though she were the reason their store was surviving. Wondering why I kept trying, I would lie awake and stare at the ceiling. Obligation, shame, perhaps a glimmer of optimism that they would change. On the evening of their anniversary, that hope died. I was going to stop being their afterthought, even though I had been for years. There was a lot of laughter in the restaurant until it stopped. All of my relatives' aunts and uncles were dressed up for my parents' 35th anniversary, and I sat at the long table with them. The air was filled with conversation and the clinking of wine glasses, but Vanessa was the center of attention. A cousin smiled and leaned forward. "I heard you're doing really well in retail, Vanessa. Already a regional manager." She nodded, savoring the compliment with a refined smile. Another family member added, "The decorations in your store are fantastic. You have a true gift." Mom grinned and spoke loudly. Dad nodded, his chest puffed out as if Vanessa were their greatest accomplishment. "She's always had a knack for business." Silently, I listened as the table praised her for her most recent promotion, creative marketing strategies, and customer likability. It continued without end. Not a single person brought up my work. For years, I had been in charge of finances, keeping businesses afloat. But here I was, once more unseen. Nevertheless, I reasoned that perhaps, just possibly, I could make a contribution tonight. I waited for a moment while clearing my throat. I added, maintaining a calm tone, "I've been looking at the family store's numbers. Your overstock is costing you money." Leaning forward, I prepared to convey the strategy I had spent weeks drafting out, a streamlined way to increase their profitability. If you change the inventory system and cut some suppliers, you could save thousands a year. The table fell silent, but not in a pleasant way. Vanessa's lips curled into a grin as she lifted an eyebrow. "Inventory? That's adorable," she remarked in a condescending tone. "Use your spreadsheets as a guide." My stomach turned as other cousins laughed and said, "I have real ideas." Mom's voice was sharp as she jumped in. "Let's avoid boring everyone with numbers, sweetie. Vanessa has already started organizing a large summer sale." With my hands clutching the napkin beneath the table, I felt the heat rise to my face as Dad sipped his wine without even looking at me. "Yeah, Vanessa knows what she's doing," he muttered. After weeks of preparation, my idea was rejected in a matter of seconds, as if I were a mere intern presenting my proposal to the CEO. I forced a smile and tried again. "Numbers aren't all that matters. I could acquire better terms by renegotiating with vendors. It would have a significant impact." This time, Vanessa let out a quick, sharp laugh. "Sellers, please, I'll take care of that," she said. The table erupted in whispers, some laughing, some embarrassed. "Perhaps concentrate on your own job." Mom dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "Let's discuss something enjoyable. Tell them about your new advertising campaign, Vanessa." Dad turned to her and nodded already as though I hadn't spoken anything. With a tight throat and the familiar sting of being ignored, I sat back. Then it took place. Dad got up to make a toast with his glass. He glanced around the room, first at Vanessa and then at me. "To 35 years of love, family, and our pride and joy," he said in a clear, purposeful voice. To be honest, we would prefer Vanessa to be our only child. The room's air was drawn out by the words which struck like a punch. The fork ceased to clink. A cousin let out a gasp. Vanessa remained unflinching, her eyes fixed on mine as she smirked, tempting me to respond. He wasn't corrected by Mom. Her face was as composed as if nothing had happened and she simply sipped her wine. Every eye was on me as the silence drew on, waiting for me to cry or lose my temper. That's not what I gave them. Even though my heart was racing, I maintained a straight face and a fixed jaw. I was falling apart within the years of being ignored, coming tumbling down. I had poured my talents into their failing store and tried my entire life to gain their respect, only to be erased in front of everyone. The last straw was Vanessa's sneer, which was a subliminal insult that I would never be sufficient. The scrape was loud in the still room as I pushed my chair back. I said in a quiet but forceful voice, "Enjoy your night." Every stride I took fueled the burning in my chest as I grabbed my bag and left my heels clicking against the hardwood. Even though the cool Chicago air slapped my face outside, the anger that was developing inside remained unabated. For years, I had accepted their contempt, their partiality, and their complete indifference. Not anymore. I decided as I stood on the pavement, my rage mingled with the blur of city lights. I was not just going to leave, I was determined to permanently break the cycle of becoming their afterthought. I sat by myself in my flat that night. My chest ached more than ever from the pain of Dad's words. "We wish Vanessa was our only child." Vanessa's smile, Mom's unspoken consent, stunned faces on the table. I kept thinking about them, and every recollection fueled a decision I had been putting off for years. I was done being their invisible fix-it guy, their financial account, and their afterthought. I had invested $600 a month in their failing store and devoted numerous hours to keeping their business afloat by haggling with vendors and reconciling their records. For what purpose? To be ridiculed, brushed aside, and obliterated in public view? Not anymore. Despite the wrath coursing through me, I steadied my hands and grabbed my phone. I put a message into our family group chat, which consists of Vanessa, Mom, Dad, and me. I finished assisting with the store. No more cash, no more guidance. Best of luck. Knowing what mayhem it would cause, I hit send with a beating heart. My phone lit up in a matter of minutes. Dad was the first to call, and I didn't bother to check the message. Mom texted back asking, "What's this about?" Vanessa sent a single word, "Really? Call me now." I felt a weird serenity as I gazed at the television, their words blending together. I had no intention of responding. Not this evening. Never. The number of calls increased by morning. Dad's tone changed from bewilderment to annoyance as he left 4 more voicemails. In one, he remarked, "We need to talk about this," as though I owed him an explanation. My inbox was overflowing with Mom's lengthy, meandering emails about how the store was our family's legacy and how I couldn't just leave them. Vanessa demanded in a loud voice that I stop overreacting when she called twice. I left all calls on voicemail and all emails unanswered. Even through the screen, I could feel their panic, but I didn't feel bad. For years, they had depended on my resources and knowledge, and they had always praised Vanessa rather than me. They would now have to deal with the fallout. Without me, the store was in disarray. I anticipated it would be. My $600 a month prevented suppliers from turning them off and paid their past due invoices. The only thing that had kept them afloat had been my advice, which involved spending hours examining their finances and optimizing their business processes. They would quickly sink without it. I had no sympathy for them. I was liberated. I was not trying to win their approval for the first time. Wasn't pleading for a shred of dignity. I was reclaiming my authority. It was also pleasant. Vanessa wasn't finished, though. I received a notification 3 days later about a new post on her Facebook page that was visible to all of our family members and friends. She didn't name me, but the message was clear. Some people think they're indispensable, but they're just jealous and petty, stirring drama to feel important. My cousins and mutual acquaintances were guessing and even tagged me in their comments. The private messages followed with friends inquiring about my well-being and others implying that I had been challenging at work. Vanessa continued after that. She made another post on my failed romances, this time stating that I was too preoccupied with my work to maintain a lover. It's all lies. However, the harm had already been done. Every notification that buzzed across my phone poked fun at my life, career, and reputation. My jaw was clenched as I read through her posts. This was a new low for Vanessa, who had always been arrogant. To divert attention away from their failing store, she was attempting to portray me as the bad guy, the unstable one. I had the option to retaliate and reveal their private information, including how they had pleaded for my assistance and how Vanessa's clever ideas had failed. However, I didn't. Playing her game would require me to respond, and I was done with that. I ignored the mounting mountain of emails from Mom and Dad, muted her number, and blocked her on Facebook. The issue now was not mine, but their desperation. The pressure persisted. Dad left a message that began softly but became abrasive after calling from a new number. He screamed, "You're hurting the family," as though I had degraded them. Mom's subsequent email was a guilt trip in which she accused me of destroying our relationship because of a miscommunication. Vanessa texted, "You can't just walk away like this," in all uppercase. I deleted it without responding. I wasn't convinced by what they said. All they did was validate what I already knew. They showed no concern for me. What I could do for them, the store, their reputation, and their comfort was important to them. That was the important thing. I served only as a tool. Every missed phone call and unread message seemed like a tiny win. I refused to fall back into their pattern of ignoring and relying on them. Vanessa continued to post ambiguous teasing about unappreciative persons or betrayals in her family. I was not broken by their sting. Her lies prompted my coworkers to start asking questions, but I ignored them and concentrated on my work. I wasn't going to let her smear bring me down since I was good at my work better than Vanessa ever was at hers. As I sat at my desk, I considered how the store would fail without my assistance, and how they would have to rush to repair what I had kept intact for so long. I felt no sympathy. I felt determined. They had overpushed me. They would finally understand what it meant to lose me. I wasn't simply leaving, I was preparing them for collapse. I wasn't finished yet either. I took a plane to Florida a week later. It wasn't a snap choice to go see my grandfather Walter. It was planned. I had ignored Mom's guilt-tripping emails, Dad's voicemails, and Vanessa's scathing Facebook posts for days, all of which were attempting to entice me back into their web. I wasn't going back, though, not to their drama, not to their store, nor to their lies. I wanted someone with the ability to make a difference and someone who would listen. That individual was Grandpa. I knew he would listen to me because he had always been fair, a quiet man who could see right through appearances. I had enough time to practice my response because the flight from Chicago to Tampa took just over 3 hours. After landing in the muggy Florida weather, I rented a car and made my way to Grandpa Walter's modest beachfront home. As I drew up, he was waiting on the porch, a smile spreading across his worn face. In a rough yet kind voice, he remarked, "You seem to have something important to share." With the burden of the previous week pressing down on me, I gave him a hug. As we sat in his living room, I let everything out while an ancient fan hummed in the background. I began by talking about the anniversary supper. I explained to him how her sneer went deeper than his words as Dad got up glass in hand and said they wished Vanessa was their only child. They lauded Vanessa's half-baked initiatives as I described the years of being marginalized, having my efforts and thoughts disregarded. I presented the $600 a month that I had been using to maintain their store for years directly from my funds. I talked about the late nights they spent resolving their tax problems, negotiating with suppliers, and optimizing their business processes only to be met with contempt or silence. Then I came upon Vanessa's blogs, where the falsehoods about my connections and job were catching on like wildfire among friends and relatives. Grandpa Walter's expression hardened as he listened. When I brought up Dad's toast, his hands, which had been hard from years of construction work, clenched into fists. "They made that statement in public?" he asked in a low, nearly growling voice. I nodded and took out my phone to show him the screenshots of Vanessa's posts that I had taken before blocking her. After reading, "Some people think they're indispensable," cousins who had purchased her story commented. My career was hampered by another post that implied I was unstable. Grandpa Walter's jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. "That isn't family," he declared. He stood pacing the room, his rage evident, and said, "That is betrayal." The family knew that Grandpa Walter had amassed a modest fortune in real estate, including several rental properties and land in Florida. He had always intended to divide it among his children, including Dad, and set aside a portion for Vanessa and me. He shook his head now, though. He remarked, "I've seen how they treat you." I had hoped that things would improve, but this is unacceptable. His voice was firm yet ferocious as he sat down. "I am altering the will. They are not worthy of any money." I didn't press him. I didn't have to. That afternoon, Grandpa Walter contacted his attorney, a sharp-eyed man in a suit, who showed up there in a matter of hours. While they talked about the adjustments, I sat silently. Grandpa Walter made it obvious that Vanessa's mom and dad were not present. Everything would be given to me, including the land and properties, with a percentage going to a nearby charity that he had long supported. With a gentle yet steely gaze, he assured me, "You've earned it for who you are, not just for what you have done." His comments weighed heavily on me, and I swallowed hard. I felt seen for the first time in years. It was not the end of Grandpa Walter. He inquired about the store's financial situation, including how much I had contributed and how they had depended on me. He shook his head once again when I described the $600 a month and my unpaid consulting. He stated, "Not out of sympathy but with assurance, they'll crash without you. Give them permission." Knowing he was correct, I nodded. The store was already struggling, and if I didn't aid them, they would have to deal with the supplier debts and tax penalties I'd been avoiding. The following day, with more determination than ever, I took a plane back to Chicago. I didn't give Vanessa mom or dad any calls. I didn't look at their texts or emails. I no longer had to deal with the store. Let them handle the problem they'd been ignoring for years, the audits and the past due invoices. I felt as though I had lost a burden that I had been carrying for too long. I met up with my buddy Emily, who had always supported me, back at my flat. I told her everything, including the meal Vanessa's posts and my trip to Florida, while we were having coffee at a tiny cafe close to my house. Emily listened with soft, wide eyes. She stirred her latte and added, "You made the right decision. They have always taken advantage of you. It's time for you to prioritize yourself." Simple yet truthful, her remarks struck a chord. She didn't pressure me to make amends or forgive. She simply understood. "Pay attention to you," she said in a strong tone. "Your life, your career. Their drama is not worth as much as you are." I nodded, appreciating her support and clarity. Despite her hectic marketing work and personal struggles, Emily always found time for me, even if I didn't ask. I sensed a change. As I was leaving the coffee shop, Grandpa Walter made a choice based on more than simply property or money. It was a line in the sand, justice. I was no longer battling for their acceptance. They would have to face their future without me while I was constructing mine. 6 months later, their entire world collapsed. Once supported by my funds and counsel, the family business failed due to poor management. The suppliers cut them off, and the invoices mounted up without my $600 a month. Hard penalties for years of careless bookkeeping, which I had warned them about, were imposed by a tax audit. They were unable to pay the devastating fines, which totaled over $3,000. Dad attempted to bargain, but IRS inspectors weren't impressed by his charm. It was already too late when Mom frantically tried to sell items. The store permanently shuttered after the bank foreclosed. It was a cousin, not them, who told me about it. I didn't check in by phone. They had already made up their minds. Vanessa's ambitious goals were destroyed along with the ship. Using her purported retail experience, she had been pitching investors on the concept of expanding the store into a chain. But her pitch didn't work now that the store was gone. Investors pulled out because they didn't want to get involved with a failing company. When her Facebook posts backfired, her reputation suffered even more. A few family members began digging after growing weary of her arrogant outbursts. They discovered that I had been the one who had kept the store afloat, not her clever ideas, but my labor and money. My relatives shared a screenshot of my bank transfers, which served as evidence of the $600 I sent each month. The remarks quickly became heated. One aunt commented, "You lied about her. You were all carried by her." Despite Vanessa's best efforts, the harm had already been done. She was unfollowed by family friends, and her co-workers muttered about her exaggerations. No one believed her justifications, so she was left fumbling to keep her face intact. Both Mom and Dad had to face their own consequences. Their obligations accrued over years of bad choices engulfed them in debt in the absence of the store's revenue. To maintain appearances, they had taken out a second mortgage, relying on my assistance to fill the voids. They skipped payments now that there was no money coming in. Their modest 4-bedroom home, where they had resided for decades, was confiscated by the bank. Their possessions were crammed into storage when they moved into a small flat when the truth became out. Relatives who had previously applauded their every remark became icy. At a family cookout, an uncle called Dad out, accusing him of pushing her away. For what purpose? Mom attempted to play the victim by saying I had left them, but it was obvious what had happened. Everything came out, including my bank statements and my emails with advice they had disregarded. They were no longer invited to parties by cousins, and their calls were not returned. Grandpa Walter did not waver. Despite hearing about the store's demise via a friend in Chicago, he chose not to contact Vanessa Mom or Dad. He confirmed the new will in a handwritten letter that I received. "It is finished," he wrote. "You own the land and properties, some of which are donated to charities. They will not receive a dime." With his signature on the document final, he would cut them off entirely. I felt a silent sense of relief rather than victory. His choice had nothing to do with punishing them. It had to do with justice, something they had never offered me. He refused when Mom called and begged for a meeting. He called her and said, "You made your bed," before hanging up. He banned Vanessa's number when she attempted to text him. Too proud or too embarrassed, Dad didn't even try to reach out. I kept my distance and concentrated on living my own life. I was doing really well as a financial manager. A tech startup that trusted my gut had given me a significant customer. Still filled with guilt trips, I didn't check on the store or respond to Mom's occasional texts. I had nothing to do with their demise. They relied on me to support Vanessa since they had based their entire existence on lies. They were now experiencing the repercussions. I heard rumors from the family that Vanessa's most recent job interview had failed, that Mom was selling jewelry to pay the rent, and that Dad was taking on odd jobs. I refrained from boasting, knowing that I had done what I had to do. I simply continued on. Their demise was more than just a financial one. It was intimate. The family members who had chuckled at Vanessa's tweets suddenly recognized her as a bully who had defamed me in order to protect her own reputation. Embarrassed by the reality, the people who had lauded Mom and Dad during the anniversary meal now shunned them. Once a source of pride, the family business was now a boarded-up reminder of their failure. The last obstacle they were unable to overcome was Grandpa Walter's will, which was locked in with his attorney. I didn't have to speak. They had made enough noise with their activities. As their lives fell apart, mine began to take form. I put all of my attention into my career as a financial manager and threw myself into my work. My best victory to date was the IT startup I had signed in Chicago. I streamlined their budget and prevented them from expanding too much by securing a $2.5 million contract to handle their finances after months of late hours and assertive negotiations. With a rare smile on her face, my employer beckoned me into her office. She implied a promotion to senior manager when she said, "You're going places." It was more than just a financial raise. It demonstrated that I could succeed without the support of my family. I was actually creating something that belonged to me. I established a new life apart from work that was uncentered on their drama. Emily became my pillar of support, always there to keep me grounded with a quick text or coffee date. We would get together at our favorite diner, share breakfast, and joke about my embarrassing client meetings or her most recent marketing campaign. She was quiet and unobtrusive in her support. I felt like I wasn't alone, since it was steady. Next was Ethan, a structural engineer I met at a networking event, and who is now my boyfriend. He was unlike anyone else I had ever dated. He was subtly self-assured and had a dry sense of humor that surprised me. He acknowledged that he had only come to the event to avoid another night of grading blueprints during our first date, which took place at a small jazz club. On our third date, we were discussing everything from bridge designs to my aspirations to launch my own consulting business while organizing weekend treks. At first, Ethan was unaware of my entire family's history, but I gradually revealed more. I told him about the anniversary meal, how Vanessa's falsehoods went viral online, and the years of being ignored. Instead of trying to cure things with meaningless advice, he listened with his palm solid on mine. At one point, he whispered in a low but confident voice, "They'll never know how strong you are." It was more than words. It was a belief I had never received from Vanessa, Mom, or Dad. I created a circle with Emily and Ethan that was more like home than a battleground. Neither Vanessa nor my parents attempted to get in touch with me, and neither did I. A cousin said they were having trouble with Vanessa juggling retail jobs, Mom selling crafts online, and Dad taking jobs at a warehouse. I had no sympathy for them. They had valued my contributions and treated me like family for years. However, they decided to uplift Vanessa while tearing me down. Now their silence was just another decision, and I was done allowing it to harm me. From Florida, Grandpa Walter sent me a postcard with a little statement expressing his pride in me. It was sufficient. I didn't require their excuses or their apologies. People who accepted me for who I was were what I needed. I was deeply affected by the lesson, but it was obvious. Value those who genuinely care about you rather than those who take advantage of you. I had spent years trying to gain my family's respect in the hopes that they would recognize my value if I invested enough cash, time, and energy. However, they didn't. They took and offered nothing in return. Grandpa Walter, Emily, and Ethan were the ones who arrived there without any conditions and were the ones who mattered. That realization altered the way I navigated the world. I began investing in individuals who gave it to me instead of looking for approval from those who wouldn't. I didn't have an ideal life. Work was hard, and sometimes I questioned whether I had been too harsh in pushing my family away. Then I would recall Mom's stillness, Dad's toast, and Vanessa's sneer. I would recall the years of invisibility and the falsehoods they propagated to preserve their reputation. In their story, I wasn't the bad guy. It was me who had left to protect myself, and it made me better. Emily's terrible puns and Ethan's laughing transformed my apartment, which had previously been a site of late-night worry, into a sanctuary. After a means of self-promotion, my career has now become a source of pride and a testimonial to my abilities after I stopped bearing their burden.